Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code SLAMTHEGAVEL for 60% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother narcostolen passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will then face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will be taken away from the only family he has ever known, and we have Judge Ann Donnelly to thank for that. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. Also, one last announcement. Go to the site, pleasedoyourjob.com. That's pleasedoyourjob.com and sign the petition. We need 3,000 more signatures. And I would appreciate if everyone would do that. I totally thank you. I have a brand new guest on. I have Attorney Tim McIIwain on. We're going to talk about how the system from an attorney looking in is and a father looking out is, and how this has been a history of power. So I welcome you, Tim McIIwain. How are you this morning?
I'm very good. Thanks, Marianne. Thanks for having me, first of all.
Oh, definitely. What do you think of family court? Do you think it should be abolished?
Well, hopefully your show is 9 hours long because no, what do I think of? The short answer is yes. I think it should be abolished. And to your introduction, I think it is another case study that is well learned, like in our society, about how power. There's an old saying I learned. I studied political economies at Berkeley a long time ago. I'm 55 now, and one of the things we learned was, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it's why governments are overthrown. It's why people like England started the United States. It's why religions changed. So this is no different. And if you look at family court and the legislative intent of it, it's beautiful, right? This idea of a specialized court of certain skill sets that are just special to the family situation, and the idea of efficiency, and the idea that it's not going to be this long litigation process like those other, personal injury animals like myself or whatever. All those things that are written as a legislative intent, I'm all for it. Sign me up. In application, it is now a runaway train, and it is probably, and this is probably I'm advocating at a certain level, but this is probably a bigger statement. It's probably more upsetting and destructive than the idea of like starting a new country, because the two things that you're dealing with is children and the destruction of someone's wealth or profession and their mental. So it's literally layered. Mm-hmm. It'll create a depression in a parent who's taken away from their child. Same with the child, and it creates huge issues psychologically with children. And the irony is, it's the court with the least competent judges. Now, in the state of New Jersey, a lot of the judges that are starting out as new judges, we have a system that I kind of am proud of in New Jersey. I'm also licensed in New York, but in New Jersey, we claim to be sort of independent. So they're not elected judges. They're judges that are chosen. Now, there's always, that's not a perfect system either. They seem to always been chosen from a certain, area of law and this and that, but they're not up for election. And why is that important? Every state has a different opinion of this. I want to be able to elect my judge. And think about that. When you're an elected judge, mm-hmm. you're going to do what's popular. right? Well, let's take the issues of civil rights. Let's take the issues of who's your big lobbyist, right? New Jersey, I'm proud of. A lot of great case law came from them because the judges were independent and their reelection wasn't dependent on doing what's popular, right?
Mhm.
And we know about civil rights and that, if you're not going to do something, unpopular, you'll have your house burned down or something like that. So anyway, I think that's one of the big issues is this also a system that has elected judges with the family court. But there's a lot more to that.
Definitely, with these elected judges, this is really bad because a lot of these lawyers will kick in for the judge's daughter's judge campaign. And so then there's favors going to be owed and created.
Well, and I've look, this has been my situation has been there's two things that have broken my heart. One, losing my first time father of a daughter that literally just turned 7 yesterday, and I haven't seen her in 2.5 years without a hearing. So that's my heart broken there, and that's created me to be very sad. And I was always a very happy person. But the second thing I'm really sad by is, and maybe it's just a naivete, I always looked at the law as something that can sometimes hold people. Okay, you don't always get justice, but it's a chance at justice. And I've gotten the sense, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're a lawyer. You must really," because I'm a lawyer. They're almost hostile towards me in terms of not letting me create records. I have motions that have been pending, I think, 4 years now, that are going to get. I guess they're going to get heard when my daughter's out of high school, but who knows? And some of the motions are like for makeup time. It's like
right.
But anyway,
And you haven't seen her in how long?
Over 2.5 years.
Mm.
Over 2.5 years, without a hearing. And that's that we can talk about that. And how is that? How could that? And what's weird is we have burned into the American psyche this idea, and we do a good job with movies, and we try to do things to show that there's this regulatory body that oversees things, right? There's checks and balances, right? We learned that as kids, right? There's checks and balances on all this power because that's what we set up in this country. Well, there's also a thing called regulatory capture, right? Where the regulators basically are the people that are regulating are the people that should be regulated. They come from, let's say, the firms that are doing the bad stuff. They're the ones on the ethics committee, right? This kind of thing. So, that's a scenario where how do you fix that, right? How do you fix the who's doing the monitoring? So there's that problem as well.
Yeah, there's no oversight. There's no accountability in family court. I too feel it should be abolished. It really just creates more of a disaster for everyone involved. It's definitely hard on the kids and the target parent as well.
Right. Listen, I think the idea, and I thought about this long and hard because we have spoken before this, and I'm all about a jury trial. I mean, I think that is the one thing in this country that separates us from the other countries. It is the most it's the only thing I'm really, really proud of. As an American, I'm losing getting saddened a little bit by our spirit lately. But the one thing, and we did it twice, we did it in the Declaration of Independence, which was one of the most brilliant documents ever written. And we did it in the Bill of Rights, which was really like, the Bill of Rights was like, oops, we forgot to give the people rights. And then after the Constitution was done, we threw in amendments, and one was a right to a jury trial. And when you said that, I thought, because I started thinking about the judicial efficiency issue, I have a suggestion on how you can do a jury trial in an efficient way. I had tried a case in Wyoming, and they do away with picking jurors. It is extremely efficient. You can do it literally within a couple hours, or like 2 hours. And you hear that, family court motions penned, you show up, there's 40 people in the courtroom, the judge is going through a docket. So a jury that can be picked in, let's say, an hour and a half or 2 hours to handle the big stuff, which is, whether what parent is, got the child's best interest, what credibility they have, really assessing it. There was a hearing in my case where the judge let the mother sit next to her lawyer, where you can see there's like notes being passed, which is like, really? And also allowed her to wear a mask. So she's wearing a mask, and her lawyer's sitting right next to her. Now, are you gonna really judge credibility and facial expressions and whether people are, right, someone's wearing a mask? It's like, it'd be like having a trial against, the 9/11 attackers and having them in a burqa, right?
Well,
and
yeah.
then, yeah, I mean, this is a little thing that went on in my case. This is one of the little nuggets that are just absolutely, crazy. But anyway, the jury idea is, I mean, these are important things, right? And if it's a rigged game, one of the things you learn if you have a juror, you try to do as a lawyer who picks juries is you try to get a jury in there, not necessarily that's like going to definitely go your side. You want to get somebody, you try to like get people that it can invent the possibility that another scenario could be put in front of them where they'll accept it, even though they're going to prejudge everything. Some people can't. There's a thing called bias where it doesn't matter, right, what evidence is put in front of them. There's a bias thing that is just, you're just never going to have them make a decision on facts because of the bias. That's what family court is all about.
Oh, definitely. Collusion and conflict of interest. And I was recently court watching a couple days ago, and I was on, video, and they were totally beating up this pro se litigant. And it was just absolutely horrible to watch while the attorney was saying how they wanted to extract attorney fees out of her, who's already broke. And I'm making facial expressions like, and so the judge says, "Miss Petrie, turn off your video. You are distracting the attorneys." So I turned off the video because I'm like,
right. I mean, and that's the thing too. Like I missed my train of thought, which was,
sorry about that.
No, not because of you, because when I do this, ask my wife, I start on one point and we end up, but the people in America believe there's a thing called due process, and they believe they just think it because we just we think, well, there's oversight, right? Well, isn't there, the bar association, isn't there, right? So when I was talking about the regulatory capture, there is no oversight. People have ingrained in their mind that one day I'm going to have due process. Oh, the truth's going to come out, and children are resilient. Those are the three things that I want to jump out a window and land on my face, because that's a nice thing to try to have someone have hope for, but there's not due process. Okay, if there's not due process, and you're thinking, well, how can that be, right? There's all these guarantees of it, and the short answer is, well, judges are not following the law.
Right.
They're not following it. They don't. When I have oral argument, the lawyer I'm going up against, who's been calling me names in all the motions, doesn't show up. It's a big firm, so they'll send the fifth banana from their firm, who knows nothing about the case and pretends there's a conflict. So they don't actually have to be accountable for the things they do, such as mail fraud and putting on perjured testimony and lying to the police. All those things that would get a lawyer disbarred. Send the fifth banana from that law firm, who's just there to put an appearance in, and then the judge, who clearly doesn't even seem like they've even read the motion, doesn't comment, sits there. I think you may have seen one of my work. They won't comment on the content of your motion, and they will put out a decision. And we know, like in the state that I'm dealing with, judges are allowed to outsource that. Well, the judges aren't writing these, so I don't think the judges are seeing the motions and writing the opinions. The judge in my case has a different writing style every 2 months. So, I mean,
right. They're not even looking at evidence. I mean, I have heard this, even in my case, they're not even looking at anybody's evidence.
No. And in my case, the other sort of boilerplate response you get is, well, you must have done something wrong.
Mhm.
right? And you know, I think I told you earlier, I had an opinion about family court from what I knew. You know, it's well known to the system that there's bad results in family court. That's one issue. Okay, we know that, and no one cares about that. That's the system. Then there's like these horrific results, right? Where
Mhm.
people are thrown in jail and kids are taken and they're all. But I also have come to learn that I always thought it was men that got it handed to them. And that's not true either. So I'm not just coming at it from, oh, I'm a guy and they really stick it to the men and because of what happened historically with men and in the family role. I have heard unbelievable, terrible results with women that were great wives or dedicated wives at least, and mothers that identified themselves as mothers for, let's say, 16 years. Um, and literally, there's two ways to traffic children. I say traffic because I don't look at what's happening as some kind of deliberative process where there's a decision making, there's findings of fact, there's a hearing. There's no hearings in my case, so it's trafficking. You know,
Mhm.
that's a very these days that's a really big claim. But what else is it? Your child is being taken. You're not thrown in a van and going to Mexico,
Right.
but they're they're gone. They're out there. So you know, and with women, you know, the playbook is this: the way to traffic is very simple. With men, accuse them of sexual abuse, easy peasy. You know, I was, you know, you can have people that were, you know, the greatest people in the world, you know, going to church. But when you accuse someone of that, a man of that, it doesn't matter if he's the nicest guy in the world and he goes to church, he's good to his cocker spaniel and all that. What the other person says, well, what is he like alone with his child? No one, it doesn't matter who it is. It could be Jesus Christ, right? And you'd say,
Mhm.
well, we don't know. You have to prove the negative. With
Right.
women, and they did this historically. Before they used to get women put in asylums.
Right.
Right? It would create enough influence where the woman would be not in her own little house, but they would be literally in a, what's called a loony bin or some kind
Mhm.
of psych ward. Now they do a thing to get women away from their children. They just say mentally ill,
Mhm.
and there, you know, there are some women that are mentally ill, and there are some, you know, men that, you know, sexually abused. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but you know, as Bill Burr, the comedian, said when talking about Me Too, he said, you know, believe women, believe women. He said, all women?
Mhm.
He was like, can we just believe maybe 87%? Like all women? So, and you know, so within the family court, which mirrors society in a certain level, there's two really bad movements against women, right?
Mhm.
Because of this whole mental health thing. And you look at these great athletes in the mental health days. So now the average person goes, oh, maybe that mom cracked. Maybe she's mentally ill, right? And
Mhm.
then, you know, with the Me Too, I mean, God forbid, you know, there's ever the accuser is never, there's no accountability to the accuser.
Right.
They accuse, and you know, you believe their word, and you know, good for her for being, you know, courageous. Meanwhile, nothing they say is true. There's no evidence that would show that that it even makes sense what's being accused of someone. uh, but it doesn't matter, you know. And then CPS is another group. Now they're the
Oh.
only hope you have, really, in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And that's going to be maybe what helps me if we ever can get them to see kind of my evidence. There's been I've had no contact. The people
Mm.
I'm going against, the lawyer and the mom, have given CPS my incorrect phone number. So when CPS says I'm not cooperating, well, that's a big crime to do. So
Mhm.
now I'm considered as not cooperative. And the good thing is I got the notes, for instance, and they wrote down the number that they gave. And now the judge has had that motion for, I think, 3 or 4 months, and he's not. I think you saw it. He's not going to deal with that. He said
No,
it's
he
literally what he said on the record. I'm not going to deal with that right now. So you're going to call someone cooperative, uncooperative, when the other person who is cooperative is giving the agency the wrong contact information.
Mhm.
It's a big problem, right?
Definitely.
All a one-sided. It's a rigged game, right? It's a rigged game, like a rigged card game. You know, dealing from the bottom of the deck, so to speak.
Mhm.
So anyway, not to go off too much. I don't know if you want to, because I could literally talk for 9 hours.
Well, how did you come across that women are getting more screwed over than men?
Well, and by the way, I don't want to sound obsequious. God bless you. Uh, a woman told me about your podcast, and I know scenarios as an attorney where they've come to me, and I'm not a family lawyer, but I've handled cases here and there that, and it's usually when they're broke. I'm the guy that represents sort of the poor, and what upsets me is in a lot of these scenarios, it's when the father or the husband is an attorney, a family law attorney, in front of the judge that he's in front of all the time, going and making all these outrageous claims and doing things like, what you put in an affidavit, right? You write it up and then you have a notary, just it basically says, is that your signature? It's not like they verify anything. Mm-hmm. So in a scenario that I know of, this woman who is, if you met her, I mean, she's the cleanest, she's a Southern belle, she's, really just like a fantastically sort of old school mom, and really that's who she was. That's what she was her whole life. And now she's reading affidavits that there's, maggots, that there's dog defecation in the house, that there's saying things that is easily provable, but it's in an affidavit that's a sworn document. And so now here's someone who's almost like an anal cleaner. Mm-hmm. In my situation, it's like calling, it's like the opposite. It's like they call you the opposite of it, and that's what the courts rule on, mm-hmm. because they don't verify any facts, and they don't. Another thing that courts don't do, which I think should be mandatory, is they should look at the status quo. They should have before it even starts. Let's say they file a motion. I think one of the things that should happen is step one, they should put aside that motion and not read it yet, and bring the parties in and get some basic information. Where do you work? Where you live? How often you see the children? This kind of stuff. Because if you create bias on the first filing, the guy, I've been accused of everything but murder, and mm-hmm. and that's around the corner, literally. Mm-hmm. I've been accused of drug use, and I'm a guy who went to Berkeley. I didn't even smoke pot. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I have witnesses that are laughing at the things I'm accused of because there's nothing true about them. It's like calling, like, it's like saying, Martin Luther King was about violence and he was about overtaking buildings. It's like, really? Is that what it was about? I thought he did. Nope. Slam the gavel, ordered Martin Luther King, violent man. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it was in an affidavit. Now, don't look at the footage. Don't look at the history. Don't look at this guy went to jail for nonviolent marches, taken from another, sort of hero, fighting power, Gandhi, that methodology. No, in family court, if the other side called him violent, that would be an order, mm-hmm. without a hearing. And I'm giving it. This isn't. It's not. It sounds like an exaggeration. It's not. It's an illustration of how it can be done and is done all the time. Oh, definitely. So then they verify. So in my case, the scenario was both me and the mother she worked for an investment bank in New York from Sunday through Thursday. She was in New York, away from the child. I'm a lawyer, worked for myself. I had a pretty good settlement, so I was really excited to be a father. I was sort of daddy daycare. So I was the primary parent from birth until it got in the family court. Mm-hmm. We had an apartment in New York and a little place in Jersey. We were doing okay. And we decided to do a project in Kentucky. We took an old carriage home. We were going to make it something that we could rent out for Derby. It became an investment project. Meanwhile, it was a setup to get jurisdiction in Kentucky. To get the Yankee to have to go to Kentucky. After 6 months, jurisdiction's in Kentucky, even though, it doesn't matter. That's the rule. It's not flexible at all. But 6 months, it could be, it's 800 miles away from where both parents are working. That's fine. Jurisdiction's in Kentucky. So what they did in my case was the mother was clearly provable by text messages and flights and all, Sunday night through Thursday. it gets into the court process, and the judge rules that I'm a New York attorney, New Jersey attorney, so I get the child on the weekends, just 2 days. Now, in Kentucky, which is another irony, has the best laws for fathers because they have a law that says there's a presumption of equal time, joint custody and equal time. Other states don't do that. They'll give one parent, like, let's say maybe 70-30 or 60-40. Kentucky's middle. They do. They said equal time. Now that sounds great. That's a great law. It's not applied because of that law, there's an uptick in false accusations and everything else, because that's the way you can get rid of that presumption. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's great law. But because of that, now there's a sort of a disproportionate amount of false accusations and no accountability for falsely accusing. So why not? So in my scenario, think about it. The child is used to the father every day. Mom's away 4 days a week. The court rules that the father gets the child on the weekends, right? Friday afternoon to Sunday, at 5 or something like that. Think about that. So that child now is never seeing the mother. Now, the mother did that because she doesn't want to know that she's in New York, right? Because that's a problem. So they blocked that, never got discovery on that. So here we go. So my child is with the grandma up until seeing me for a day and a half on the weekend. The mom gets back on Friday, right? The mom works until Thursday or gets back Thursday night. If anyone that should have the child on the weekend, it should have been the mother. This is an example. Like, the court should have done a status quo So here's these rulings that are absolutely, traumatic to the child. I mean, the child is used to something. It's been completely pulled away. Status quo. She's used to seeing her father. Now, the problem with that too is, we have all this progress, right? We have, women lawyers, women judges, African-American judges. We have all this progress, but then when it comes to certain cases, you go, oh no, you're the father figure. You work Monday through Friday. Well, no, I don't. I work for myself and I work from home. This is a new world. This is not Leave It to Beaver time.
Right.
So the ruling in the court was the most devastating thing you could do to a child. And how is that in the best interest of the child? To literally not only see one parent, a day and a half, and have it raised by the grandmother. And I fought that law. I fought the law, and this is where it gets even. I thought it was a bad law, and because I did, I got an ethics complaint against me because they said it was frivolous. And believe it or not, that one of the day, it was considered a frivolous argument to contest that jurisdiction question with that statute. I didn't think that, again, back to the legislative intent was never that the child be raised 800 miles away from both parents. There's no way it could mean that. So the judge should have some discretion on that statute to apply the facts differently than if someone's 6 months, that's the jurisdiction. It'd be like Donald Trump, doing a project in Egypt, building a hotel there or somewhere really far from where he is from, let's say New York. And then he brings his children with him, and the project takes 6 months, and then a divorce happens, and the kids are now forever going to be in the court system in Egypt or Hawaii or whatever. Does that make sense? But there's no again. And one of the other analogies is, and look, I'm being critical. This is a very dangerous thing to do, as an attorney, be critical of the system, and then ask for relief from a system where you basically are pointing out what's wrong with it. But that horse left the barn. And these judges, literally, the best analogy is they're the lifeguard at the pool that's asleep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or the inmate running the asylum, right? Attica.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's one scenario that would have been avoided if before they got into who struck John and who's a bad person, get some general information. Where is that child, and who is that child with? During the week. Because to say it's best interest of the child, to rip that out. My daughter developed an eye problem after that, and it wasn't because of her eye. That was considered what happens to children when there's a trauma. She had started wearing glasses after that. And
Hmm.
my poor daughter, I don't want to think about it. But that was that the courts did that. That's their work.
Well, sure, because it increased her ACEs score with all that trauma being taken away and living here, living there. Now you're being raised by grandma, which is what happened to my kids, because when my ex took my kids, he dumped them off at his mother's or dumped them off on his
Right.
new future ex-wife.
Yeah. Yeah, and my kid, the mother isn't involved at all. It's at 2, she was getting French lessons, and the grandmom was a French teacher,
Mm.
and at doing like horseback riding lessons at 2, 3. I mean, listen, can you think of a more dangerous thing to do? Why? Because then you don't have to take care of it, and
Right.
then also you ramp up the cost of what childcare is. We really have our 3-year-old like learning ballet with Barishnikov.
Mhm.
Shouldn't you be the parent a little bit? Raised by strangers. And that's
Right.
the new world we live in too. Right? We have sort of our kids being raised by, they don't go out and play anymore. It's like a play date that's scheduled. Like we're almost raising little executives, right?
Mhm.
They're always scheduled to do something. But that's another story for another day.
Well, yeah, that'll be another podcast for another day. Funny you should say "Raised by Strangers" because my third book that will be coming out is called "Raised by These Wolves."
No,
And
yeah,
because these kids are being yanked around and they're not being taught the niceties or, please, thank you, or, sending a
no,
they're not being taught.
no.
Um,
And
it's
not to bring religion into it. Like I was raised with it.
Mhm.
The mother was raised without it. My child's being raised without it. And you can say what you want, even though you can be really critical of the Catholic Church. And I'm not Catholic, but I'm sort of interdenominational. But there are lessons you learn in church.
Right,
There's a way you see people interact. There's a pleasantness to how you interact with strangers, how you interact in a environment that's not your own backyard. Those are great things for children to learn,
right.
and not necessarily something that a child can learn from a parent.
Mhm.
But when they're otherwise being dropped off with these like a chaotic guy that has a pony ranch that walks them around, or whatever things are being done, drop them off at a pool. I mean, there's it's really scary. That there's less and less involvement of the children. And I read something interestingly about the women's movement,
Mhm.
that the real reason, the people that were behind that movement, it was the way it was sold was liberty, right? And they did all these commercials with, they did a lot of print ads with like women smoking a cigarette with other girls and drinking coffee and all that. And it was a really good buildup for women's rights, for getting more women in the workplace. And really the game plan was to have women in the workplace, to have the family sort of be divided, and now there's not a family unit, and now there's 2 taxpayers. Because I don't know if you know, the United States was essentially sold in 1913 to a thing called the Fed. I think there's 13 people or groups that have that, and we all pay taxes to them. The money they lend us, so they needed 2 people to pay, not just
Mhm.
one. And that was one of and I read this. That doesn't mean I read that was one of the reasons they wanted the liberation movement. But I still think that I'm a purist. I still like the idea. I mean, my mother was worked and was sort of the main breadwinner. I like the idea of women working, but the fact that it was sinister to have the sooner you can get your children into school and
Mhm.
aware parent, then you have right the state as the indoctrination, which is ugly.
And
And
it's true. Yeah, exactly. It's true. And it's the women's rights movement really didn't do anyone any favors, either women or men, as well as the patriarchy hurts men as well as women.
yeah, it's well, the questions and how does it get turned around? Um, I don't know. Um, like I said, I think people don't realize it, and people don't believe me. They say you must have done something. They don't believe me that. How can your kid be? there's a law that says you can't have a kid taken away from the parent for more than 5 days. It doesn't matter what the law is. If you have a lifeguard asleep, right, at the
Right.
pool, and there's a law that says you can't go in, in the deep end. It doesn't matter that there's a law that says you can't go in the deep end, right?
Right. Well,
So,
see, the family court judges, they just make the rules up as they go along. In fact, there was a judge, and it was quoted in the newspaper where she yelled at an attorney, "I don't have to follow the Constitution." So
and
this is
that's
what we're dealing with.
that, and that's one of the things I said here is that the system. I went sort of in reverse order. The system, that's exactly right. The Constitution does not apply in the family court. Think about that.
Mhm.
So the number one guarantee of our rights is not in the family court.
Mhm.
So what happens? If you don't have rights
Oh.
or guaranteed by our government, when it comes to who's raising your child, if you even get to see your child, whether you have, my scenarios that, they're trying to have me pay child support that's literally 4 times my income. How can you do that?
Oh, yeah, they make up these figures. They impute
I mean,
to you.
right. If my taxes were X for 10 years, how can you say I make 5 times X? Now that's something that, eventually will be appealed, but in my case, they're not going to rule until ever. But that's something that an appellate court would say, wait a minute, this is confiscatory. How do you have someone pay something they don't have? Right.
Well, that's what my judge did to me, even though I was involuntarily terminated from my nursing career. She still had it in her head that I was actually working full time as a nurse.
They
So
and they,
yeah,
uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
she just imputed me at this figure of, I think she had me making, I think, was it almost 4,000 a month? It's like, well, I wish I
Yeah.
could make 4,000 a month, but gee, maybe whoever filed the second indication of emotional child abuse on me maybe shouldn't have done that. So
Yeah.
they screwed themselves, essentially.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it was like, oh, you're a lawyer. Lawyers make a lot of money. I'm like, well, I'm a civil rights lawyer. So what about the guy that represents people that have no money? Does he
Right,
Is he rich? They don't hear that, right?
right, right,
Nurses, they work forever. They make good living. You always have a job.
right.
Really? Well, at least look. The fact that she even knew you were a nurse is impressive, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
that's a big time discovery there. But yeah, it's look. It's hard to not. And I think in a lot of ways they create scenarios like you said. You're the pro se. Same things happen with me. Pro se litigants that can't afford a lawyer are paying the attorney fees to the people that can afford an attorney. I mean,
Mhm.
think about the unfairness in that. I mean, that doesn't even make sense,
No, and
right?
that's unconstitutional.
Yeah, I have an appeal right now where because I opposed the motion,
Mhm,
the judge wrote that I was manipulating the system and I was using tactics. It was their motion. It was their burden of proof.
mhm.
So when I oppose motions, I get hit for attorney fees for opposing motions. So in other words, they're saying, give up, get out of here,
Right.
pack your bag, and go back to Soprano territory. We don't want you, in Kentucky. They should just say that rather than. But again, and we know, like life, it sounds. I hate the cliche. It's all about the money. It is all about the money.
It is.
It's the reason why cases are taking 100 years and they should be decided in probably less than a year. They really
Right.
don't need to go. I mean, what exactly are we deciding here? Right? There's 3 issues or something like that. Does it really need? And then they involve the whole system. You're paying for psychiatrists. You're paying for retired judges to be friends of the court judges that make opinions that the judge can look at or not. And everyone's paying everyone's got a psychologist all of a sudden. Everyone's got, and then there's a friend of the court, and then the child gets their own lawyer. So then there's a guardian of litem, and then that's always a really dangerous thing because that's usually the friend of one side. I recommend the guy I went to high school with to be the gay. They call it a Gavel, right?
Yeah.
Guardian at. And then you're like, and that's the other thing. There's literally there's no conflict of interest. I found out in my case that the judge, so in Kentucky, they're elected judges and they don't have to have been family lawyers. Okay. So they could be, criminal lawyers or, whatever. So what's important in Kentucky is who the staff attorney is. So that's the attorney that is the person that knows the law really well and writes the opinions for the judges. Okay. I say that for a reason. So in New Jersey, there's a family law judge, and it's usually someone's a new judge, and then they'll have a clerk, and the clerk is someone who just got out of law school, and for a year they clerk for a judge, and they learn from that judge, and then they go on. In Kentucky, the clerk is actually, the person with the knowledge, unlike in some states where it's just the law student. So in Kentucky, you have a judge, a law clerk, who's really the person that knows the law. In my case, the law clerk was married to the lawyer I was going up against. Now, you would think the judge would have to reveal that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you can say, well, that doesn't mean he's going to be unfair. Really? High conflict. So the husband comes home, I'm dealing with this jerk, McIlwain, and his wife's not going to be influenced by that. Oh, and you're writing the opinion, by the way, honey. Pass the salt.
Oh, definitely. I can relate to that because my ex's wife worked in the courthouse as a clerk. I don't know what she does now, but yeah. And my attorney said, oh, that won't be a conflict of interest. Don't worry.
My lawyer said it too. And the other thing is, this is the other really big problem is because these family lawyers make their living in front of these judges, they're not going to expose them because they have another case tomorrow or two that day. Mm-hmm. So if you get a bad result, it's next to impossible to, because I've had lawyers who were my lawyers say, oh, you can't file an ethics complaint. Oh, you can't appeal that. Oh, don't worry. Right here I am foregoing doing things because my lawyer doesn't want to criticize how bad the judge is on appeal. Right. So in my case, I said, wait, I'm not going to let the judge's clerk be married to the lawyer I'm going up against. So I got a courageous lawyer who, a woman who's my hero. So it's funny, you can't, I got some trying to kill me and some trying to help me. So, and look, right. You're one of the ones trying to help me, but wrote a thing to have the judge sort of recuse, and the judge did recuse. But it went from bad. I went from Stalin to Hitler. So, I mean, it went from bad. It was, and then, it was almost like, oh yeah, okay, we'll give you another judge. It's worse, right? So it's like, and I didn't think it was possible, but, man, it is. I have no rights, and you think, oh, you're a lawyer, you must be able to. Nope.
No, it doesn't matter, because even in the case of Catherine Youssef Kasanoff, she was a federal attorney. It didn't matter. They ruined her as well in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're doing. Yeah, I mean, they're dead set on that. From trying to lose my license as a lawyer, lost my daughter. Like, okay, mm-hmm. So the question is, and the advice I get is, you're not going to win. Leave, get out. And then I have other sides that says that's not your style. I mean, some right. of my biggest results were, being too dumb to quit. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to win, but I also don't think. This has become something that I think I'm going to, because of what I see there, dedicate my life to and helping people in this situation. Even though I don't want to, I have PTS going to a family court, but I don't, forget about my case and my daughter and all that. What about the next person? They should know this is the playbook on how your kid's going to be taken. And my lawyer told me. She said that, certain things were going to happen, and they did, and I prepared for it, and I did things, and it didn't matter because we don't have a hearing. I'm ready. I can't wait for a trial, 20 years from now.
Oh, God.
But yeah, so, yeah, that's the scenario there.
Right. That's it, because they keep, well, at least also in my case, probably in a lot of people's cases, the opposing attorney puts in continuances after continuances. Oh, yeah. And, this is not healthy for the target parent. I just don't know. I just think family court should just be outright abolished, take it down to civil court, have your 6-person jury, and let's be done with all of this stuff within, 9 months to a year.
Well, I think, and can't be abolished. It needs to be looked at, and there needs to be some what they call reform. Okay,
I don't
which
know.
is
Can you though?
you can do it, but I mean, I think the three things that like what I said, have a status conference before you read any motion, right? On the basics, because look at what happened in my case, right? That's one thing. I think a jury trial on the big issue, right? The custodial evaluator and all that stuff. And I think that these judges, like a career politician, I don't think they should be career judges. I think that
Right.
they should be, and that's the problem when there's elected judges. But I really think there should be like a term limit so that they'll do the right thing. This idea, and then maybe they can graduate to another type of judge. It's not going to happen, but it should,
Right.
because there's a thing called the appearance of impropriety. In my case situation, the law firm I'm going up against literally runs fundraisers for that judge. So okay, think about that one.
Yeah.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. And then you have the attorneys on the social media of the judge giving them thumbs up and, oh, you like the Boston Celtics? I do. I mean, that's crazy to me. When I was during my case, when my friend of the court judge, I got a friend request on Facebook. I called her up and said, hey, I'm just letting you know, I got, Facebook will do that, right? They'll shoot you a friend request if they see someone in your circle. I called the judge and said, look, I'm declining for obvious reasons, right? Because of the appearance of impropriety. You see oh my God, isn't Tim Light? Look at him petting a puppy and taking care of a handicap, right? The influencer. But I did that, but the other side's not. They're like, Judge, I can't believe what a great athlete you were. It's like, oh my God. It's like, and it saddens me because I used to, there's certain things about this country that I was so proud of. And as an attorney, heartbroken. I mean, I'm almost as heartbroken about the system than as losing my daughter, raised without a father.
Yeah, definitely. And children are not resilient. I really, not with this family court torture scheme, extortion scheme.
Yeah, those are good words for it.
Because some things cannot be fixed. You've got ACEs scores. You got kids with high ACEs scores, kids with ulcers in their stomachs, and because of just being so upset all the time, walking on eggshells, living with the favored parent as opposed to the target parent. So they have to please that favored parent.
Yeah.
And do anything wrong, oh God forbid, what could happen to them.
There's actually a book on this. It's called Parent Interrupted, and it gets into that. What happens, and then the complete control of the because now the child thinks, oh my God, I might lose this parent next.
Right.
Then there's like this ganging up on, if you saw videos of me and my daughter, I mean, I was father of the year. I went from that to, the mother took down all the social media because it was all positive. And then I became this monster. And it's in an affidavit, so it must be true. So anyway, yeah, it's tough. Well, and I appreciate people saying, well, I had many people say just let it go. In my situation, I really can't let it go because they're trying to throw me in jail. They're trying to.
That's what happened to me. Exactly. Yeah. You can't stop. You have to.
And as a father, I was like, you know what? I don't think it's good, because what happens, I would see my daughter, we'd have an unbelievable time. And then next time I would see her, she'd have all these, Daddy, make sure she was ready, because the mom gaslit her and said, oh, you're crying? You're not crying because you miss Daddy. You're crying because Daddy hurt you. This is the kind of crap I'm dealing with.
Oh,
so that
definitely.
Like and you'll do things like one of the things I do, my little daughter loved it. You blow on her belly to make like the
I do that to my chihuahua.
Yeah, yes. Fart sound, especially if I have my beard. It was like mad. And then, or I put my foot on her stomach and right. That became an affidavit that I was hurting her, right? That I was, that I'm pushing too hard and I'm playing too rough or whatever. My daughter's never scratched her knee with me. There's been no incidences at all. Now, on the other hand, I see her, she has a black eye and she's, this was an accident. I'm like, one of the jokes I said was, tell it to the judge, my little daughter. But like, unbelievable. Yeah. So what happens is now the daughter, after the first visit, has all these complaints, and it's usually done at the exchange. And then as soon as I get her in the car, then it changes. Okay, Daddy, what are we doing? Because she's doing that for Mommy. And then one time after she saw me, she started crying to the mother. It's an emotion. and she didn't want to say she was crying because she missed daddy. She said she's crying, and she said she said the supervised visitation person, because she didn't want to say daddy. So here's my daughter hedging her best. Yeah. And that's why, as a father, I was like, this is not, I have to protect my daughter, and maybe the best thing is for me not to be in her life. Now she's 7 now, she's going to learn logic. So now I'm really ramping up the fight, because between the edges of this thing has been going on since she's been almost 3. So it's from 3. So now I think she knows logic a little bit, but she's been indoctrinated, right? Even though there's no, but yeah, it's so I thought, maybe I have to protect her. And every time I'm in her life, she gets grilled, and there's turmoil, and she's anxious. And, and I would get blocked from my daughter. And what they would write is, well, she was in school that week, the month when I was blocked from my daughter, after she was seeing me regularly, my daughter was acting out, and she was, hitting other kids and everything else. Right. So they accredit that to not the fact that the father's been taken out of her life, and maybe that's why she's upset. They're like, oh, she's doing that because she was just with her father. I mean, think about this logic.
Oh, definitely.
When she was with the father, she was doing great. And then she's no longer with the father, and she's not doing great. And they say she's not doing great because of the father visits, not the fact that you took the kid's dad away. I mean, this logic is like, it's insane. And this is what's going on. People say the most incredible things, and it becomes like the truth. It's like, the bigger the lie, the more they'll believe it. But this is the stuff I'm going up against. I go, do they? Look, and I have people, and I said, look, I agree with that maybe it wouldn't be good being in her life because it's the turmoil. But then, what's happened is, because the 2.5 years I have not been seeing my daughter, the mother has gone to CPS pretty much every week or so. So I finally got the CPS records, and she's going to CPS, and it's like a fishing story. She keeps adding. So she said an incident happened 4 years ago that originally CPS is like, this is basically, it's crap. There's no severity. It didn't happen. It was, and it's for something to be unsustained by CPS. That's amazing. So they didn't sustain it, but she kept going back on the same incident for 3 years, and then started to add things, right? Saying I have generational violence in my family. And I was reading this stuff that was like crazy, and said like, I failed a drug test, and then named a drug that I've had a prescription for 15 years. And CPS, they just write it down. So if someone comes in and says, okay, well, what happened was my daughter, there was an elephant that's 800 pounds that went through the window of my daughter's room and got in bed with her. And the CPS would write that down. Elephant went through the window and jumped in bed with daughter. Now that's CPS. Now we know that's not possible. That an elephant goes through a window the size of that's 12 inches, but that gets written down because it was told to them. It gets written down.
Right. Yeah. In my case, CPS was called, which I never knew, for possibly 2 years, but it was everything. They just didn't bother me with it because they knew it was I can't even talk today. It was not sustainable. So, but they found a caseworker where they could find something that would stick, which wasn't even, I was exonerated from both charges. However, it cost me my career.
It got sustained. So I think it was the 19th name that I saw finally got me. Some woman, whatever, she got me, and started saying, I mean, I don't want to get into the things that are said because it's like, my name's attached. I mean, I will eventually get into it because it has to be said how ridiculous. But the accusations are so bad. It's like, Tim, even if I win, you can't win.
Right. Right.
Use this and you win. It's like, oh, he only won because he's a lawyer. Well, not because it's a BS count. Anyway, but yeah, no, that and they'll keep going until they find someone and they get it right.
Right. Right.
Like, they keep going, and then they're okay with that. And that's sad because, especially a state like Kentucky that doesn't have a lot of money, doesn't have a lot of resources, to have resources on two people. You have to understand, before this entered the family court, there was never anything. There was no calls to the police, no domestic violence, nothing, zero, nothing. And then you get to family court, and then you just start. It doesn't matter that there's been nothing in the past because you just have to say it, right? You know, I have 11,000. I have 11. I have 1,100 pages of text messages going back, I think, like 5 years, that you can't find one text where I'm mean or say anything nasty.
Right.
You see one thing where, you know, it's all, you know, where are you, Hunter, Mr. You know, they would get into different things about our relationship. You can see in the text messages that it's not even close to what's being said now in family court, what that relationship was. So anyway, yeah, I don't know how it gets fixed. I think people like you, I think, you know, in my situation is I want cameras in the court.
Yes.
I want the judge, I want the people to see a judge rule. You know, I have the best expert literally in the world. She's very hard to get, and she's going to testify. Now, I also have a case in federal court for that, you know, they're trying to throw it out for intentional infliction of emotional distress and defamation, because when they went to CPS, they started to say things that were defamatory. But there's going to be the family court. I almost want people to see, oh my God, look at this judge. How is this judge ruling? You know, here's this person is the best, you know, and trains police forces and the FBI, and she's testifying, and it's the most obvious case he's ever seen, and he's going to rule against it, which he will. You know, he will. He'll rule against her. You know, they'll say something like, well, you know, they'll say something that's like silly, like, well, you haven't evaluated her last week. The daughter said, you know, like, I just can't. I can't imagine. But well, you know, you have to keep trying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and like you said, how they twist things on, you know, why the kid's crying or whatever. But then you've got these nutty therapists. Like, for instance, when I visited my boys, I wore this necklace that says "Love you more," and it's like something a parent always says to the kid. The kid says, "Oh, I love you, mom or dad," and the mom or dad will say, "I love you more." It's like, it's not a big thing, right? Even my friend found the necklace at TJ Maxx. She said, this is you say this all the time. And then again, I was walking or going into Giant Eagle. I see a mom and daughter walking out, and the daughter says, "Oh, mom, I love you." And the mom goes, "I love you more." So it's a common saying, right? But you get some nutty, inept psychologist that does not know what child psychological abuse is. And she'll say, "That necklace, and this is how she said it, because her voice is really annoying. "That necklace demonized the father."
Right. Right. Yeah. I knew that. Right. That means you're a better parent than him. Not you love her more than the daughter loves you, which is how every parent feels.
Right.
No, in a situation, and it's amazing what they'll run the court with. I had a situation. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I had one where, because my daughter would be like, you know, "Daddy, is this your house?" And the mom would be like, "He doesn't live here. Blah, blah, blah. He lives in New Jersey." And I had this great townhouse I got that she loved her room, and she had like Elsa bed and all this. Never got to sleep in it, by the way. But we'd go with it, and I agreed. Anyway, I'll get into that. I got blocked from my daughter for 6 months, and basically agreed to draconian terms. My lawyer said, you have to reestablish a relationship. And then I agreed to supervised visitation, even though the accusation was considered BS but it was good. Now I have a third party that observing my daughter, which you would think would be a feather in my hat. So to show this is a daughter that, you know, is not afraid of this. You know, she's bossing me around. She's jumping on my lap. So the things I got accused of, it's not even consistent. Right. But my daughter, because she was sad, you know, she loved her. We would do scenarios, and she would say, "Let's pretend I'm sleeping over." Mm-hmm. And she would do this thing where, you know, and I wake her up in the morning. That's what I used to do. So I gave her, and we used to go shopping with this one place that had, like, you know, boats and all this. It was like one of those, what are they called? Like it's like it's a huge place that sells like sporting goods. I would take her in there because there was animals, and she loved, you know, all the boats and stuff. And I got her a necklace that was a little pink heart, and I put just a fake key on it. It was a key of something I don't know what it was for. And I was like, "Here on her," I said, "Remember, Daddy's always close to you, and you always have a key to Daddy's heart and his house." Well, that became emotion.
Oh my God.
What's the deal with this heart? What's the deal with this key? Explain it. And because I want my daughter to, my daughter's being told that I left her, which is horrible.
Right.
And then I hurt mommy. What? And like, and this kind of stuff. And it's like, hurt mommy, this kind of thing. So, and then I had my daughter say, Daddy, why are they saying you hurt me? And I'm looking over at the therapist. I go, are you going to write that down? Oh, I
Oh.
didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. You didn't hear it? Why are they telling me you hurt me? Is what my daughter said to me. And it doesn't.
Oh, see, all of that's child psychological abuse. That supervisor should have written that down. So that child is a child psychological abuser. The judge that's entertaining this is a child psychological abuser. Don't get me started.
Yeah, no, and then, with my scenario, because we had a court-ordered therapist, and I thought, well, look, I don't want to influence her, right? And be like trying to charm her and like, hey, hang on. Well, that became, he never checked in on me. And my lawyer's like, well, doesn't that show a lot of restraint to let you treat his daughter without him? Whereas then it's in the notes, all the things that the mother tells the therapist, and I won't get into all the stuff, the therapist did write down there was no evidence of this, except for what the mom told me. So I have those kind of nice things, but I'm not going to have a trial. Everything. And I actually, believe it or not, I got the chance to take the deposition of my daughter's pediatrician, who wrote a terrible affidavit that there's no way she wrote it. And she showed up for a deposition. I can't believe it. I had an hour to get it on the record. I'll show it to you. And literally everything that was told to her, she got from the mother. And I showed it wasn't true. Like she said, like the daughter doesn't have her own place to stay at daddy's house. Mm-hmm. Daughter sleeps with her father. Daughter takes baths with her dad. I showed her a picture of me. I'm a former Division I quarterback. I'm 6'4", let's say 230. I show a picture of me in the bathtub. I literally don't fit. It looks like an elephant on a stool. Oh. The other thing is I show her a video of my daughter, because my lawyer was smart, take videos, in the bathtub, just happy as can be. And my daughter, I guess, who's a little crazy, I guess, she loves cold water.
Mm-hmm. I did when I was a little kid.
Cold. Oh, guess who doesn't like cold? Males. I don't like taking baths with, even if she's 2. She was 2 at the time, by the way. Mm-hmm. What? 1, I don't fit in the thing. 2, I'm not getting in, so.
Right.
And then the pediatrician who wrote it down because she got the information from the mother was like, oh, I guess I was wrong about that. Here's her bedroom, which is awesome. She wouldn't comment on the bathtub thing because I guess I don't know how I could. I don't know where she'd even go. It's such a funny picture. I almost look stupid in it, but I knew, and that's why too. If you start accusing people,
right?
Why don't you go to the police? Why are you going to family court?
Exactly.
Think about that.
Right.
Isn't that, you're really going to go to family court when you're going to start accuse people of bad stuff? That's another. Shouldn't that be you know why? Because the family court would have the police would have came in and looked at me. It would have been, the investigation would have been over in 3 seconds.
Right. Yeah, this is what has got to go. These false accusations and calling them out in family court. And this is why family court must be abolished and take it back down to civil court. There's no way we can reform this well-oiled machine that's extorting money from parents to use children as pawns. And just to let you know, a really good book came out recently called Alienated When Parents Won't Parent by Lisa Goodpaster. Here's a picture of the book.
Oh, wow. Lisa.
Lisa Goodpaster. And I just ordered it. I can't wait to read it because I'm dealing with one that's alienated, hasn't talked to me since, I would say, in general, since 2014. So that's life. But
unbelievable.
Yeah. So, and the thing also, what Lisa points out in her TikToks is that it's the stepmothers that are influencing these kids. And so in my case, the stepmother could not have kids of her own, so she stole mine. A very convenient way. And this is another podcast. I won't bore anybody with it.
No, and I mean, towards that end, like I have a friend, I can give you a lot of bad results in family court. One was a really bad divorce that happened because the guy was a stockbroker, and when the fall of the market happened, the woman literally, the wife divorced him 11 days later. So he was making, let's say, $700,000, and by the time that the divorce happened, he had $17 in his bank account. Well, the judges ruled that he makes $1 million a year. Meanwhile, the market fell. So I had to cross-examine. There was people that had, MBAs from Harvard that had hedge funds that went bankrupt. There was unbelievable banks that went under. The whole U.S. economy needed trillions of dollars to, but my guy, who's the father, was bad with his finances. How about, but they're not the United States, and all these these investment bankers that were Harvard educated. That's okay, but so they made him pay an amount he couldn't make one payment. And then they're going to throw him in jail. They're going to take his license away if he can't make a $23,000 payment a month. Because his tax record showed for the last 2 years that's what he's making.
Yeah. See, this is why I think these domestic relations units should be audited, and those should be revamped. There's a lot I'd like to see done.
But so let me get to the other scenario. So the mother, and he was a football player, so he wasn't in the best shape, let's say, and he was always, but he was a great athlete, whatever. But his wife was like pretty or whatever, and they have a daughter, and the mother was always calling the father a fat shit.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about that. The daughter is half daddy, right?
Right.
My parents were divorced too. My mom never said a negative thing about my father,
right?
Because she knew I was half him. He's from Western Pennsylvania, like where you are. And that was a good thing because I, knew my dad was a really good businessman. He was 6'4". He had a good person. She would say nothing but positive things about him. Mm-hmm. That was good. That was my mom's credit. In this scenario with my friend, this child has been told, hears that the father is a fat person. And guess what the daughter is now? A fat person.
Oh my.
Now this is, 11 years, I forget how many years it is, but I think she's in high school now and she's overweight. She has eating disorders. Because she heard half of her is a fat. And this kind of stuff.
Right.
But she's the parent that has the kid most of the time. And then what's sad too is when the kids, and then especially when they get to a certain age, they want to be with their friends anyway. So
right.
Like I'm losing, I don't know what's going to happen with her confidence and not having a dad around and all that stuff, but it's pretty obvious what will happen. But, pretty soon when she's 17 or 15, when she didn't want to be with any parent, right? She wants to go play. So that's the other scenario where it's really a small window. That's why these courts, for them to take this long, I mean, it's criminal. It's really, it's the worst type of crime. The great storytellers, Steven Spielberg, who's fantastic, right? He looks through a lens, he knows how, and I love movies for the sense, because as a trial lawyer, you have to tell a story, and you do things like, have the reluctant hero, how to introduce the villain. They're very good at that in Hollywood. They know how to do that. And Steven Spielberg, I think if you remember, one of his great movies was about the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I guess, series, right? Mm-hmm. And he thought of the worst thing you could possibly do to inflict harm was, he told the story about how in this, wherever it was, they took the children. So the whole story was about these children that got taken from their parents and were put in sort of like, and he does the whole thing where they're in work camps and they're like, they're hitting with a big axe, they're hitting coal. And the whole motive of the story, which gets you as a viewer, you're crying. The worst thing you can do, the worst thing that Steven Spielberg, the biggest villain he could come up with was the Nazis. That's a good one. And the biggest thing he could do to show the emotions was a parent being taken from the child. Mm-hmm. And they do that in family court ad nauseum without thought. And Steven Spielberg said, this is the #1 way to get somebody really emotional in my movie. So I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yes, exactly.
These other courts that have legitimate hearings and trials and all that, think about it. They're considered more serious. Okay, look, if someone gets run over by a car and they have a broken leg and they have a limp for the rest of their life, that is a big deal. There's no question. Mm-hmm. But to psychologically mess someone up who needs both parents, right? That is way worse than someone who got ran over by a truck by Walmart. Mm-hmm. But not the system. The system views it. That's a serious courtroom, and the family court is, It's an area where there's literally, I mean, it really should be called anti-family court. So
Oh,
I want to start a competing podcast with you just to, keep you on your toes. No one will watch it, but because one scenario I thought of is family court was told to me, it's like the movie, I think I called the Thunderdome. Two people enter, one exits.
yeah.
That's what family court has become, a place to let one person beat up another person who ended at the end of a relationship. Let's pick someone who deserves to be beat up because that relationship ended. And it has zero to do with it. This whole, they say best interest of the child. It makes me, I want to put someone through a window.
Yeah.
They'll say that word, and that's an opinion. So, oh yeah, it's in the best interest of the child. And then there's these laws that say you're supposed to maximize the amount of time that each parent can be with the child. They do the opposite.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, they start reducing time. And
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I I don't want to keep you all morning because we're going to do another podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully I'll lose weight for the next one. I mean, I look really puffy here.
Oh no, I don't think so. Everyone looks 10 pounds heavier on camera. But yeah,
Well, sorry. Well, thank you again. And
no, but
listen,
how can people?
I don't mean to be. Again, I use the word obsequious. I had to look it up. It means you're, being a little brown noser. But I mean, God bless you. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
It is one, courageous. Two, it's so needed. I hope you can get your viewership up. I think that even someone who hasn't been through the family court, if they heard this, I think would be sensitive to it and motivated. The problem too is the people that know family court, that have been through it, there's your grassroots, but there should be people that know, because what's important is, if let's say you didn't have a bad family divorce, and I never even got married. The child we had a child when we were friends, and because we didn't get married, this is why she's punishing me. Mm-hmm. So, but the parents that have children that go to school with the child who has a horrible, family setup, they're affected by this, mm-hmm. right? That my daughter is in the school, right, and going to be making friends with healthy families. So healthy families should want family court to deal with these children differently. I'm not saying my daughter's become like a serial killer or something, but I'm saying I don't know what the effects are going to be. Maybe she's going to be able to mask it, and and I always one of the people that I started to like to watch her movies, and I started to identify with, was Audrey Hepburn.
Oh yeah.
And Audrey Hepburn in society was the leading lady. She was an A-lister. She was the first $1 million woman actress. And she was an unbelievable dancer. And she was an unbelievable, actress and everything, right? Entertainer. When Audrey Hepburn was 6 years old, her father left or was taken away or whatever. And she never, at 6. And she always mourned that. And at one point she, I think, tried to find it, whatever. And while the persona of Audrey Hepburn was this, oh my, I want to be her. What a great, what a beauty. She always had trouble with her relationships. She was always sad. Mm-hmm. We see her in movies as like this, the fun-loving, charming, well-dressed. Her as a person who lost a parent, I'm not saying just definitely father, but in that situation as a father, because there's a difference between a father and a daughter, and a mother and a daughter, or, of mother and a son. So she lost her father at the age of 6, and really that never happened. It never came together again. And her whole life, she had a hole. Oh, yeah. And while the family court would be like, look how good Audrey Hepburn is doing. That's how they would say. Well, look how, because that's, oh, look how good she's doing. Oh, really? You really know what's going on inside, and why Audrey Hepburn never had a meaningful relationship? Is that doing good? Yeah, she's made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. She's a darling. But I used her scenario, and it really resonated with me, because I was thinking, I hope that's not going to be my daughter. So I don't want to get that now, but yeah. Where I think she's very smart. I think she's going to do great things regardless. But, what bothers me is what's going on inside. Right. But she's beautiful and smart and all that. And she might go on to be president. Who knows? But mm-hmm. That's the outside. Right. What's going on in the inside. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Well, I still want to have you back on, but how can people reach you if they have any questions? Oh boy. I guess email. um,
Okay.
I mean, you can call, I guess, but I mean, I guess email. I can give a number as well, but
Uh,
my email is Attorney McIIwain, so it's ATTORNEY, all one word, all lowercase. McIlwain is MCILWAIN, and it's at me, so it'll go to my iPad. You can go to my website, which is McIlwain Law, but I'm not sure, and I don't get a ton of emails there or whatever, so it all gets filtered to my Apple iPad anyway. But
okay.
I can give a
Yeah,
phone. I
I
can give
wouldn't
a
do that. I wouldn't give a phone number.
right. Well, I mean, I would give it. I would give
You'll
it
find
Google.
it anyway.
Oh, God forbid someone calls me. But no, I will offer help to anyone. I'm not licensed in every state, so they need to see a lawyer for. But
Mhm.
that's the other thing too. I wrote a child support check to my lawyer, and I used to joke, oh, Kentucky needs a real family lawyer. We would joke because he used to laugh about how bad the result was, and I did a joke. I had like this fake letterhead where I had like McIlwain Law Firm, and it had like it almost looked like it was out of Batman, and I had my stupid townhouse on it. He didn't read the letter. He didn't read the letter. It had a child support, and he forwarded it to the mom's lawyer, and they brought an unauthorized practice of law case against me.
Oh
So let me
no.
and I wrote a child support check to my lawyer with a bad joke. Shouldn't have done it. I get it. I have an ethics complaint that got sustained. That was considered unauthorized practice of law, and that's I've been a lawyer. I've never had an ethics complaint against me ever. Ever
Oh,
since I had a daughter, I've had the same person. I've had 3 from the same person, and the ethics committee is ruling that it was unethical that I wrote. The other thing that was unethical was that got against me too. That was sustained. I mean, now I have a permanent record as an attorney as doing something unethical. The other thing I did unethical was we went to mediation, and we had this long mediation. This is where I agreed to all those draconian terms. And at the end, my lawyer's like, look, let's get it to where these guys are getting along. Why don't you guys dismiss the ethics complaint? Because, that's not good for this to continue on when they're trying to be nice to each other. So at the 11th hour, we were all exhausted. They threw it in as like term 9, and there was 2 term 9. So you could tell it got added and it didn't even do.
mm.
That became an ethics complaint because I didn't even realize it and my lawyer didn't realize it. And I'm not going to go after my lawyer for it. It's unethical to ask someone to withdraw their ethics complaint.
Hmm.
So so that's number 2 ethics complaint against me. And the third one is what I challenged that law. I challenged the law that says that a child can be raised 800 miles away from both parents. That was considered a frivolous filing. So now anytime I do anything in any court, they say he's a frivolous litigator.
Same.
And it's almost like my as a lawyer, it would be like, those guys that were like conscious objectors, like in Vietnam, like guys
Yep.
like Martin Luther King, people that went to jail for standing up for what they thought. I really did think that was a bad law. And some of my best results as lawyers, one of them was, college athletes are getting paid because of one of the appeals I made in the video games. It's really well known. I lost at the trial level, and it was an appeal that made that law where now, college athletes get paid. I was the original filer of that. I don't know if you know that. So, and then the class action lawyers came in and squashed me like a bug. But my point is, I lost that case and appealed it. When I did this in family court, dealing with my daughter, I wasn't even representing another person. I was representing myself.
Mhm.
I had 3 ethics complaints against me. 1 for sending a child support check with stupidly with my Kentucky address. 2 for going to mediation and settling. Shouldn't have used that term. I mean, shouldn't have had him withdraw and 3 for challenging that law. So now, after almost 30 years as a lawyer with unblemished, I have now 3 ethics complaints against me, and then she just filed a new one too.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I probably won't be a lawyer very long. So I'll help everybody make sure they get a lawyer. I'll help anyone I can with this because I can't imagine and they need to know as an attorney, it's not like I'm doing well. So not being a lawyer shouldn't discourage them. And I think one of the ways to maybe handle these cases is to be pro se, because when you're pro se, that's your only case. And if a judge is doing something wrong, you can call the judge out on it, versus when you get a lawyer, that lawyer's not going to interrupt that system. That lawyer's not going to do the things they need to do for the client because that lawyer is thinking about his living. He doesn't want to be a pariah or a scarlet letter on his head. Oh, this is the guy that complained about the judge. Pro se people can. People that represent themselves can hold a judge accountable. Unfortunately, I might have to be doing that in my case because I never did a complaint against a judge in my life, and I've had some bad results, but I've never done it. You have to, but anyway, that's another time.
Oh yeah, we're going to do another podcast. So hey, don't jump off, okay? Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here in the future with Tim McIIwain and other exciting guests. And you can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes, Anchor FM, you name it, I'm there. And we'll be talking. Thank you so much, Attorney Tim.
Yeah, well, thanks again. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate what you're doing more than I can even express, and keep doing it.
Oh, won't stop.